Today's video is brought to you by the EckhartsLadder Twitch account. 30 minutes after this video goes live, which is 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific, I'll be starting my campaign playthrough of Halo 3. If you'd like to join me, the link is twitch.tv/EckhartsLadder, or you can subscribe to X2, my second channel, where I'll be eventually posting the VOD. Anyway, let's get started. The Alliance is usually portrayed as a ragtag group of insurrectionists fighting a mighty empire. And while that is fairly accurate, when you realize we're dealing with a galaxy-spanning conflict, the Alliance turns out to be sporting a fairly sizable military force. And as a kid, I always assumed that basically all of the Rebel fleet was at the Battle of Endor, and that they basically had a dozen or so capital ships. While that may have been the intention when Return of the Jedi was created, the lore has subsequently changed. Students, open your copies of the Essential Guide to Warfare and please turn to page 161. There, we have the following quote. By one estimate, at the height of the Galactic Civil War, the spacefaring forces of the Rebellion amounted to just 7% of the Imperial fleet's strength, while the total number of Alliance troops was just 3.5% of the New Order's military forces. The book continues, explaining that the size is only possible because of the unification of Rebel cells across the galaxy in 2BBY. That also means while the Navy was fairly sizable, certainly a lot larger than I would have guessed, the paragraph says just 7% of the Imperial fleet's strength. I think I would have put it at near 1%. But anyway, notwithstanding that, the Navy as a whole was ragtag, and the individual fleets could have had vastly different levels of sophistication and even utility. Still, the Empire had 25,000 Star Destroyers and perhaps millions of support ships. That gives, theoretically, the Alliance almost 2,000 large capital ships. Again, this was at the Alliance's peak, but we do know their forces were sufficient to openly challenge the Empire in certain sectors where they actually held a numerical advantage. But there are a ton of things we have to keep in mind when we see these numbers. First of all, the Alliance had no real Star Destroyer analog, at least until the Mon Calamari joined their navy. And because they focused largely on smuggling vessels, repurposed freighters, starfighters, etc., it's very difficult to directly compare their strength with that of the Empire. Also, a large portion of the Alliance's navy was made up of sector defense forces. For example, the Mon Calamari would have had local fleets protecting the planets within their systems. These ships would technically be counted as part of the Alliance Navy, but would not have been useful for any short notice offenses. The same would have been true for the Celestins, the Wookiees, etc. Regarding the fleet size at Endor, it's finally worth noting that a large portion of the Alliance's navy had been depleted by that point. It certainly was not at its prime. We have the battle at Deep Space Besh, which saw the Alliance betrayed and a large portion of one of their fleets destroyed, representing a significant loss of capital ships. However, more importantly, dozens of Rebel forces were destroyed earlier during Operation Domino. This had seen the Alliance try to transform into a proper state, pushing Imperial fleets from systems and attempting to dig in defensively. The problem was, although the Alliance did have a relatively powerful navy, it was still nothing compared to that of the Empire, and when they stopped moving, they were easily routed. And this led to a doctrinal shift as the Rebels began to focus more heavily on starfighter combat, and besides for their new Mon Calamari cruisers, their overall supply of capital ships likely dwindled significantly. Still, the fleet at Endor would not have represented all of the Alliance's power, at least as it was portrayed in the movies. And more importantly, I think it's clear that the Galactic Civil War was just that, a civil war between two proper factions, rather than just a group of rebels hiding in an ice cave and trying not to get blown up. Alliance Special Forces commandos, for example, numbered over 100,000 and were considered a small part of the Alliance's overall military. But what do you think? This lore is obviously very technical, and I'm wondering whether you can personally reconcile it with what we see in the movies. Does it change how you see the Alliance? Is the lore just a little too out of touch with the actual portrayals on film and in the expanded universe? Let me know all of that and more down below. Today's question comes from Human Anonymous. Could a normal person meditate and focus their energy into becoming a Force sensitive or possibly a Jedi? I think the answer to this might surprise some some of you. I don't think you can ever meditate or practice enough to become a Jedi. However, we do see in the Thrawn duology that George Cardass, who had no prior Force sensitivity, after decades of studying with the Ang-Ti monks, was able to do some Force abilities, specifically their fairly unique ability to teleport objects. Now, he certainly wasn't able to do it as well as someone who was Force sensitive, and this was only Legends information, but yes, it does seem like with enough practice you can develop slight Force powers. There is also the possibility that Cardass already did have an element of Force sensitivity. He was extremely skilled in everything he did, so it is possible, but it's certainly a fascinating situation. But also, let me know what you guys think of that one down below. If you'd like me to answer one of your questions at the end of a video, make sure you leave it with the hashtag AskEck, and also make sure you sub with notifications on so you don't miss it if I answer. Anyway, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, may the Force be with you.